Let's talk about one of the most overlooked yet most damaging forms of emotional manipulation: chronic flaking. On the surface, it just looks like someone being unreliable. Plans fall through, they cancel last minute, they forget to text back. But when it becomes a pattern, especially without explanation or apology, it becomes much more than that. It becomes a subtle tool of power. And worse, it becomes your new normal. See, consistency builds trust. When someone repeatedly says they'll show up and doesn't, it erodes that trust, not just in them, but in yourself. You start questioning if you're expecting too much. You wonder, was I unclear? Was I too pushy? Too available? You begin shrinking your needs to avoid being a burden. But here's the reality. This isn't about you being too much. It's about them doing the bare minimum and hoping you accept it. This behavior is passive-aggressive because it masks disregard as forgetfulness. They never directly say, "I don't care." They let you feel it. No confrontation, no clarity, just silent signals. "You're optional. I'm not accountable. My time matters more than yours." Psychologically, this creates what's known as intermittent reinforcement, the same concept that makes gambling addictive. You never know when they'll show up or flake, so you cling harder to the few times they do follow through. You magnify those scraps of consistency. You overvalue their presence because it's rare. That's where the trap sets in. Eventually, you find yourself adjusting your standards just to stay connected. You stop expecting follow-through. You lower the bar. And when you do that, you start abandoning your own self-respect. You tell your friends they're just busy right now. You say, they've got a lot going on. But if you look closely, they're not flaking on everyone, they're flaking on you, because they've learned that you'll tolerate it, that you'll stay, that you'll wait. And that's the unspoken power dynamic. By making their inconsistency your emotional responsibility, they get to avoid being held accountable. If you bring it up, you're too intense, too emotional, or making a big deal out of nothing. So you silence yourself, just to keep the peace. But let me be clear, someone who repeatedly flakes without explanation isn't just poor at scheduling. They're showing you, in real time, how much, or how little, they prioritize your presence. Respect isn't built on grand gestures. It's built on showing up when you say you will. And when someone keeps disappearing without warning, they're not busy, they're unreliable. They're teaching you that your needs will never come first. So what do? You stop accepting the bare minimum. You stop rationalizing disrespect, and most importantly, you stop waiting, because the person who keeps bailing on you without reason isn't confused. They're comfortable. Comfortable knowing you'll keep giving them access without having to earn it. Withdraw that access, protect your time, raise your standards back to where they belong. You deserve more than someone who treats your presence like an option and your time like it's disposable. Let's dive into one of the most emotionally disorienting tactics in toxic dynamics: ghosting, followed by a sudden reappearance like nothing ever happened. At first, the silence feels confusing. Maybe you said something wrong, maybe they're overwhelmed, maybe they just need space, so you wait. You double-check your last message, you give them time. Days go by, maybe weeks, and that silence, it starts to sound like rejection. It starts to feel like abandonment, but then, out of nowhere, they reappear. A casual, hey, a meme, a heart emoji, a photo reply, no apology, no explanation, just back. And now, you're emotionally cornered. Why? Because part of you is relieved. You missed them. You wanted to hear from them. So when they pop back up, that sense of abandonment gets replaced with comfort. But underneath that comfort is a dangerous shift. You're learning to normalize disrespect. You're being conditioned to expect that people who hurt you won't have to take accountability. And you're learning to silence your own feelings in order to keep the peace. This is the ghosting trap. It's not just about disappearing, it's about what happens after. The complete refusal to acknowledge how it affected you. When someone ghosted you, they left you in an emotional vacuum. No closure, no clarity, just silence. And when they return with no accountability, they're avoiding the consequences of that choice. They're signaling that your pain is inconvenient, that their comfort matters more than your clarity. But here's the deeper psychology. They don't want to lose access to you. Ghosting gives them space to explore other people, avoid intimacy, or retreat from emotional responsibility. But returning without accountability is their way of keeping the door open just in case. They want the option, not the relationship. They want your loyalty without earning your trust. Now let's talk about what this does to your mind. You start to question your instincts. You wonder if you overreacted. You hesitate to bring it up because you're afraid they'll ghost you again. So instead of expressing your hurt, you downplay it. You tell yourself, maybe I'm being too sensitive. But you're not. You're experiencing the effects of emotional suppression. A pattern where you betray your own feelings just to avoid being left again. Stoic wisdom says, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And in relationships, that means, don't just believe you deserve respect, enforce it. If someone can ghost you, then reappear like nothing happened, and you let them, you're teaching them that your pain has no consequence, that your silence is permission, that your boundaries are negotiable. But they're not. If someone disappears and comes back without accountability, you don't owe them comfort. You don't owe them a clean slate. What you owe yourself is peace. And peace only exists where respect lives. So when they come back, and they will, ask yourself, did they take responsibility? Or did they just return for access? Because if they're not sorry for disappearing, they'll vanish again. And you deserve someone who shows up, not when it's easy, but when it's hard. This one's subtle, and that's exactly why it's dangerous. Unlike overt manipulation, stringing someone along with vague promises feels like hope. It's not cruel, it's not aggressive, it's just unclear. And that's what makes it so effective. Because when someone feeds you just enough suggestion of a future, we'll see, let's not rush it. Maybe when I'm less stressed. Your mind fills in the blanks. You take the maybe and turn it into eventually. This creates one of the most addictive psychological loops in a toxic relationship. Intermittent reinforcement. You don't know when they'll show up. You don't know when they'll keep a promise. But you do know that if you stay long enough, something good will happen. And that uncertainty, it keeps you locked in. Your nervous system gets trained to survive on breadcrumbs. They cancel plans, but say, I'll make it up to you. They don't define the relationship, but say, you mean a lot to me. They ignore your needs, but say, I'm trying, can't you see that? You don't get consistency, you get crumbs of reassurance. And that's where the psychological trap begins, because every time you try to leave, you remember those crumbs. You remember the good parts, you remember the potential, and suddenly, leaving feels premature. Suddenly, staying feels like patience. But patience without progress is just self-abandonment dressed up in virtue. Stoic wisdom says, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When you keep entertaining empty promises, your thoughts become painted with fantasy. You start thinking, if I just hold on longer, they'll come around. But reality isn't in what they say, it's in what they do. And the danger here is that you start making emotional investments without a return. You plan around them, you wait on them, you defend them to your friends, you restructure your life for a person who can't even give you clarity. And over time, this erodes your self-esteem, not because they rejected you, but because they left you in limbo. Let's be clear, people who love you don't keep you confused. They don't need years to figure out how they feel. They don't leave you guessing. If someone wants you in their life, they'll act like it. And if they can't give you certainty, then they don't get access to your vulnerability. Here's the hard truth. If someone wanted to be with you, they would be. No timing issue, no confusion, no excuses, just action. So, if you're stuck in a loop of almost maybes and not yets, it's time to step back. Ask yourself, am I building a future with someone, or just being kept as an option? Because love without clarity isn't love, it's control. This tactic is one of the most emotionally draining, psychologically deceptive, and dangerously effective tools in the toxic playbook. And yet, it's often dismissed or misunderstood. Giving just enough attention isn't about connection, it's about control. You've felt it. You're on the edge of walking away, done with the coldness, the silence, the neglect, and then suddenly, they send a sweet message. Maybe they like one of your old photos. Maybe they bring up an inside joke. Maybe they ask to see you. Just enough attention to spark the memory of who they used to be. Just enough to reignite hope. And that's exactly the point. This isn't real effort, it's emotional bait. It's a survival mechanism to make sure you don't detach fully, because they don't want to lose your energy, your validation, or your availability. But they're never willing to give more than just enough. You don't get consistency, you get cycles, you don't get progress, you get placation. And because it doesn't feel like abuse, you question your own judgment. You think, maybe I'm overreacting, or they're trying, right? But deep down, you feel the emotional exhaustion, the constant state of emotional limbo, the highs that never last, the lows that always come back. This is called breadcrumbing, and it's designed to keep you emotionally invested while they remain emotionally unavailable. You never get the full version of them, just fragments. Fragments of affection, fragments of time, fragments of the person they know you fell in love with. And it's no accident. This tactic hijacks your nervous system. It trains your body to live in anticipation, to stay hopeful, to stay hooked. But let's break this down clearly. If they really cared, you wouldn't need to guess. If they really wanted you, they wouldn't risk losing you. If they really loved you, their effort wouldn't come in doses. Stoic wisdom teaches, waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. So apply that to others too. Stop making excuses for someone who only gives you pieces. Someone who only shows up when you're ready to walk. Someone who lets you bleed out emotionally, just to hand you a bandage when it suits them. Because here's the truth. People who value you show up when it's not convenient. They don't let it get to the point where you feel unloved. They don't operate in delay mode, they operate in alignment. So if someone keeps you around with sporadic attention, that's not love, it's a strategy. The strategy? To make sure you don't move on while they explore their options. And if you're honest with yourself, you've probably felt the emptiness in those moments, the gut feeling that it's too little, too late. But because they reappear just before you reclaim your peace, you get drawn back into the cycle. So here's your challenge. Next time they give you just enough, ask yourself, is this the bare minimum? Or is this the best they're capable of? Because if their best still leaves you confused, waiting and emotionally starving, it's time to stop settling for crumbs. You were never meant to survive on scraps. You were meant to be loved fully, not occasionally. Let's clear something up right away. There's a massive difference between someone needing space to heal and someone using space to punish you. In healthy relationships, space is chosen together. It's respectful, it's communicated clearly, and it's rooted in mutual growth. But in toxic dynamics, space is used as a weapon. It's vague, it's cold, it's sudden, and it usually comes without context. You've probably experienced it. Things get tense. Maybe you bring up how you're feeling. And instead of talking, they disappear. No explanation, no compromise, just, I need space. But what that really means is, I need space so you can sit in anxiety. I need space so you'll start blaming yourself. I need space so you'll come back more desperate than before. That's not emotional maturity, that's emotional warfare. It creates a pattern where you become terrified of expressing your needs because every time you do, they pull away. The connection feels like it's on a leash, and they're the only one holding it. If you step out of line, they yank it back. And the worst part? They come back when they want, when they're done being silent, when they're done sulking, or when they're bored. And you're expected to just accept it, to pick up where you left off, to be grateful they returned. But here's what you need to understand. When someone disappears instead of communicating, when someone takes space without accountability, when someone uses silence to regain control, that's not space, that's manipulation. And it trains you to associate conflict with abandonment. It wires your nervous system to expect punishment anytime things get real. So you start shrinking. You stop speaking up. You walk on eggshells, hoping they won't pull away again. Stoic wisdom reminds us, it's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. So let's reframe this. If someone constantly uses distance to avoid growth, they're not evolving. They're escaping. They don't want resolution, they want relief for themselves at your expense. Let's break it down even further. True space is about reflection, fake space is about control. True space has boundaries and intention. Fake space creates confusion. True space respects both people. Fake space punishes one. So ask yourself, is this space helping you grow together, or is it just giving them time to avoid accountability? Because the answer matters a lot. Don't let someone weaponize silence to reset the narrative every time they mess up. Don't let space become an excuse for emotional neglect. And don't confuse your longing with love. Sometimes the silence isn't teaching you to wait. It's teaching you to walk away. You're allowed to say, this isn't healthy for me. You're allowed to say, this version of space feels more like punishment than progress. And you're absolutely allowed to choose peace over confusion, even if it means letting go of someone who never learned how to stay. This one's subtle, but deadly. Avoiding serious conversations doesn't always look like someone walking away mid-argument or saying, I don't want to talk about this. Sometimes it looks like deflection. Sometimes it looks like jokes. Sometimes it looks like false promises to talk later. The later that never comes. And over time, you stop trying. You've probably been there. You bring something up, calmly, maybe even nervously. You try to express how their behavior made you feel, but instead of listening, they shut down. Or worse, they flip it. Suddenly, you're the one being dramatic. You're too emotional. You're making a big deal out of nothing, and before you know it, you're apologizing for bringing it up in the first place. That's not communication, that's control. Here's what makes this tactic so destructive. It's not explosive. It's exhausting. It doesn't end in big fights. It ends in silence. It breaks you down slowly. Every time they avoid the hard conversations, they're teaching you a lesson. Your needs are inconvenient. Your feelings are overwhelming. Your concerns don't matter here. So you internalize it. You start thinking, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe if I just stop bringing things up, we'll be okay. But okay shouldn't mean emotionally starved. Let's be clear. Emotionally mature people lean in when something's off. They don't make you beg for reassurance. They don't weaponize your vulnerability. They don't leave you feeling worse after trying to speak your truth. Avoiding conversations is a power move, because if the conversation never happens, they never have to be accountable. They never have to change. They never have to face how their actions affect you. And you're left holding the emotional weight for both of you. Stoic wisdom reminds us, don't argue what a good person should be one. But in toxic dynamics, only you are expected to live by that standard. You do the emotional labor. You do the forgiving. You do the introspection, while they avoid, deflect, and disappear the moment things get uncomfortable. Let me break it down. If someone refuses to have hard conversations, they're refusing growth. If someone only engages when things are easy, they're not a partner. They're a passenger. If someone makes you feel guilty for wanting clarity, peace, or emotional safety, they're not ready for real connection. So how do you combat this? You stop chasing resolution from someone who hides from it. You stop trying to build intimacy with someone who runs from depth. And you stop twisting yourself to keep peace with someone who profits from your silence. You want a healthy connection? Then you need to be met halfway. No more one-sided conversations, no more shrinking your truth to protect their comfort, no more accepting emotional crumbs and calling it love. You don't have to scream, you don't have to beg, you don't have to perform, you just have to stop giving access to people who deny you the dignity of being heard. Because your peace, your clarity, your sanity will never come from someone who avoids the truth every time it gets inconvenient. So let's be real for a moment. If you've been on the receiving end of these patterns, the flaking, the ghosting, the vague promises, the hot and cold attention, the calculated silence, you're not imagining it. This wasn't bad luck. This wasn't just poor communication. It was strategic emotional avoidance. And the goal? To make you doubt yourself, question your needs, and eventually accept less than you deserve. But now you see it. You're not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're not asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. Because a real connection doesn't require constant confusion. It doesn't make you feel like love has to be earned through silence, patience, or pain. And it sure as hell doesn't avoid accountability every time you speak your truth. Stoic wisdom teaches us that the most powerful form of control is self-control. And now that you're aware of these psychological traps, you hold the power, not them. Not the person who disappears when it matters. Not the one who only shows up when they're losing you. Not the one who thinks love means never having to listen. You hold the power when you stop chasing answers that were never coming and start choosing peace that doesn't need explanation. So if this resonated, drop a comment below and let me know which part hit hardest, because sometimes the most healing thing you can hear is me too. And if you're ready to break free from emotional manipulation, stay locked in. More powerful insights are coming your way. Subscribe, share, and remember this. You don't rise by getting their validation. You rise by refusing to shrink. Your silence isn't surrender, it's self-respect, and that's your new standard now.